I never imagined that the moment my daughter came into money, the first thing she'd do would be to cast me aside like some unwanted object. That night, as rain soaked through my sweater and her security lights blinded my swollen eyes, it wasn't the storm that broke me. It was my daughter's voice, slicing through the night like glass. "You'll never see a dime of my money, you old witch." My suitcase hit the concrete just as she said it, bursting open like a popped blister. Clothes I'd folded only hours before spilled across her pristine driveway. Underwear, socks, an old blouse I used to wear when babysitting her kids. My toothbrush rolled into the gutter like it knew it didn't belong anymore. She didn't flinch. Her new boyfriend, barely older than her own son, stood behind her, arms crossed, smirking as if he'd just won a prize. The mansion behind them was still half-wrapped in real estate ribbons. She hadn't even bothered to take down the sold sign. I stood there, no shouting, no begging, just quiet. The rain slicked my hair to my scalp and bled mascara into the creases of my face, but I stayed still. Her kids weren't home. Thank God they didn't see their grandmother get discarded like a worn-out mop. "You're a leech," she screamed. "I worked hard for this. You don't get to mooch off me just because you're old." My jaw tensed, but I still didn't speak. Not yet, not when I knew the truth. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. She'd won the lottery 10 days earlier, $10 million, just like that. And overnight, I became dead weight. She used to say if we ever hit it big, we'd travel together, buy a duplex where I could have my own place and still be nearby for the kids. She told her friends I was her rock. But the moment that check cleared, she didn't even leave me a blanket for the night. I picked up my socks off the pavement slowly, one by one. My hands trembled from the cold, but I refused to let her see me cry. She stared at me with those eyes I used to kiss goodnight. Now they were empty flat. "Get off my property or I'm calling the police," she said. "You have no right to be here." The words lodged somewhere behind my ribs. I wanted to scream. "I paid your rent for 4 years. I raised your babies while you bounced between jobs. I gave up my retirement to help you start over again and again. But I didn't. Not then, because I wasn't ready to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Instead, I clutched my suitcase and stepped back. The rain mixed with the dirt on my shoes, turning everything into sludge. She thought I'd crawl back, tail between my legs, grateful for crumbs. But she'd made one mistake, one small oversight that would cost her everything. She never checked the name on the lottery ticket. A couple of weeks earlier, we were still a team, or at least, that's what I told myself. I was cooking dinner, folding the kids' laundry, covering half the bills out of my pension without complaint. She was between jobs again, something temporary while she figured out her next move. I never asked too many questions. I just did what I always did, held the line for both of us. That little house, the split level with the cracked tile and chipped banister, was still filled with noise and mess, cartoons too loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. And we had this habit, her and I. Whenever life felt too heavy, too bleak, we'd swing by the gas station and each grab a lottery ticket. It became our little ritual. "Could you imagine?" she'd say, holding up her ticket like it was a golden passport. $10 million. No more ramen, no more calls from debt collectors. I'd laugh and say something like, "Yeah, maybe I'll finally get that porch swing I keep talking about." We never really expected to win. That wasn't the point. It was hope shared between us in $2 slips, a way to dream without commitment. Some weeks we forgot. Other weeks, we'd come home and line the tickets up on the table and pick our favorite numbers. She always liked birthdays. I chose random ones just to mess with fate. If I win, she used to say, grinning, we split it down the middle. "I got you, Mom." She always said that. I got you, and I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Even when she didn't pay her half of the water bill, even when she rolled her eyes when I asked her to clean up the living room before the boys got home. Even when she left me watching her kids so she could go to interviews that somehow always ended at bars. She had her moods, but I made excuses for them. She's just tired. She's trying her best. She doesn't mean it, because that's what mothers do. We cushion the blows. We carry the weight they don't even see we're holding. But that week something was different. She started acting strange, pulling away, jumping when her phone rang, snapping at the boys, whispering behind closed doors. I thought maybe she was depressed again or overwhelmed. I didn't push. Then Thursday came. We were watching TV, some local news segment about a winning lottery ticket sold just down the road. Same gas station we always went to. Someone in this neighborhood's a millionaire, the anchor said. She shifted on the couch, didn't smile. You ever buy from there? She asked, casual. Yeah, I said. Grabbed one Monday with the groceries. Why? She shrugged. Just curious. I didn't think much of it. The next morning, the ticket was gone. Not in the drawer, not behind the magnets, not on the fridge. I looked everywhere. My heart sank with each cabinet I opened. I didn't ask her. I didn't want to believe it, because we always played together. And she promised if we ever won, we'd share it. The day she took the ticket felt like any other day, until it wasn't. I remember that morning as if it were yesterday. She made her usual hurried breakfast, barely saying a word as she fumbled with the keys. The boys were running around, the house filled with that typical morning chaos. She had her head down, glued to her phone, scrolling through the endless stream of messages. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now, looking back, I realize how different she had become. I had noticed her change, but I couldn't place my finger on it. At first, it was small things. She started staying up late, scrolling on her phone long after everyone was asleep. Then, the quiet conversations behind closed doors, the kind that always seemed to stop as soon as I entered the room. But I told myself I was just being paranoid, that it was nothing. After all, she was my daughter, and we'd always been close. That night, she didn't even offer to help with dinner. She used to love setting the table, making sure everything was just right for the family. But that night, she sat there, fiddling with her phone, hardly looking up. The moment she mentioned winning the lottery, I felt my stomach drop. Her eyes, that once gleamed with excitement whenever we talked about our little ritual, were now cold. There was no smile, no joy, just this strange, guarded look. I won, she said, holding the check out to me. She was trembling, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The check was for $10 million. At first, I thought I was hearing things. My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to smile. That's incredible, I said, trying to mask the doubt creeping up inside of me, but something was off. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. That was when I realized something was wrong. She hadn't even told me she bought a ticket that week, and yet here she was, waving this check around like it was hers. I kept my face neutral, but I couldn't stop the feeling of betrayal seeping into my bones. You said we'd share it, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't even sure if she heard me. Her gaze was already elsewhere, her mind lost in the world of what she could buy with all this money. I could see it in the way she looked at me, like I was already irrelevant to her newfound wealth. I'm going to get us out of here, Mom, she said, her voice shaking with excitement. We're going to live the life we deserve. I didn't argue, I didn't fight. I just nodded, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, I knew the truth. She had taken what was mine. She had stolen from me. I spent the next few days in a fog. Her excitement and constant chatter about what she'd buy, where she'd go, who she'd take, all of it was like a knife twisting in my gut. The more she talked, the more I realized she was slipping away. And with her, so was everything I had ever worked for, everything I had given for her to succeed. I couldn't sit still. I had to know where the ticket went. So I did what I had never done before. I asked her directly. I can't find the ticket, I said one morning, my hands trembling as I held a cup of tea. Where is it? She froze, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? She snapped. I gave it to you last night, didn't you see it? My blood ran cold. She was lying, I knew it. She hadn't given me anything. She had taken it and I couldn't prove it. She saw the hesitation in my eyes, and for a split second she seemed to soften, but only for a moment. Look, don't worry about it. I've got it handled okay. You don't need to be involved in all this, she said, brushing past me like I was a stranger. It didn't take long for the signs to become clear. The house we had struggled to keep afloat was no longer home. It was now just a place for her to store her things until she could move on. The kids were still young, still needing guidance, but she had already turned her back on them too. The quiet, loving home we built was crumbling, piece by piece, as she built a mansion in its place. I didn't say anything. I kept quiet, hoping it was all just a phase. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a phase. She was changing, and she was taking everything I had with her. Days passed, and I kept to my routine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was slipping through my fingers, and I had to catch it before it was too late. Then, one morning, I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a receipt, an old receipt from the same gas station we'd bought our tickets from. It was tucked away in my purse, forgotten. I stared at it for a long time, my mind racing. This was it. This was my proof. The next day, I decided to take action. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and fears. I had to know for sure. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had spent too many years pouring my heart and soul into raising her, into being there for her, to watch her throw it all away for the sake of a lottery ticket. But more than that, I needed justice, not for me, but for the integrity of everything I had ever believed in. The next morning, I pulled on my old coat, the one I'd worn for years. I didn't want to look suspicious, just another person going about their day. But the moment I stepped outside, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. I wasn't the same woman who had quietly supported her, who had always put her needs before mine. That woman was gone. Now, I was ready to stand up for myself. I drove to the gas station where we'd bought the lottery ticket. It was the same one I had visited for years, a quiet little place with old pumps and a small convenience store. I had no idea what I would find, but I knew I had to ask. Ben, the clerk behind the counter, looked up when I walked in. He smiled and greeted me, but I could see the recognition in his eyes. He knew me. After all, I had been a regular for over a decade. "Miss Evelyn," he said, "long time no see." I gave him a tight smile, trying to stay calm. "Ben, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady, though I felt like I was trembling inside. "Do you remember the lottery ticket I bought last Monday? The one I joked might change my life?" He furrowed his brow, trying to recall. "Yes, I remember. You said you were going to buy yourself a beach house and leave your daughter the dishes." He chuckled, but I didn't laugh. This wasn't funny. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "That ticket's missing. Someone else is claiming they bought it." Ben's face dropped. "Wait, you're saying that winning ticket?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. I nodded. "I signed the back. I always do. Could you check the security footage?" Ben hesitated for a moment, and then his expression softened. "I can check it for you, Miss Evelyn." I followed him into the back room, my heart pounding in my chest. The small screen was grainy, but it didn't matter. There I was, standing in line, handing over my money, receiving the ticket. And then there was the moment when I signed the back of that ticket, my name clear and bold. I couldn't believe it. I was looking at the proof right there in front of me. She had taken something that wasn't hers, and now I had the evidence to show it. "Ben, would you mind if I recorded this?" I asked. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead." I pulled out my phone and started recording. No words, just the footage. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It was all coming together. Later that day, I made the call to the state lottery office. I explained everything. The day I bought the ticket, the location, how I had the security footage, and even the signed ticket with my name. I was calm, but my heart was racing. The woman on the phone listened carefully, and when I finished, she said, "I'm going to need you to send over everything you have. We'll open an investigation. If your name is on the back and it matches the footage, the payout can be legally challenged." I could hardly believe it. The payout could be frozen. This could be my chance to make things right. "I can freeze the winnings?" I asked, my voice calm. She assured me, "Once the investigation is formally opened, yes." I hung up, my mind racing with the possibilities. I had taken the first step, and now I just had to wait, but waiting was the hardest part. As the days dragged on, I couldn't help but think about my daughter, how she was living in that mansion, flashing her new life for all to see. She had turned her back on me, and now she had everything I had worked for, or so she thought. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I stayed quiet, knowing that the silence was my greatest weapon. The more she flaunted her wealth, the more she exposed herself. It wasn't long before the truth started to unravel. The moment I had been waiting for was getting closer. The days passed in a blur. I spent them sorting through the evidence, talking to lawyers, making copies of documents. Each time I thought about picking up my phone to call her, my hand would hesitate. I wasn't sure what good it would do anymore. The time for talking had passed. She had made her choice, and now, so had I. I wasn't going to beg her for anything, not for her love, and certainly not for her recognition of what she had done. I still couldn't quite believe the depth of her betrayal. She had taken something from me that wasn't just money. She had stolen my trust, my belief in her. She had always said she would be there for me, that she would never forget where she came from. But when that check cleared and the mansion went up, I was nothing more than a distant memory. Something to be discarded, something to be ashamed of, but the silence, my silence, was the hardest part. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. She had moved on with her new life, flaunting her wealth like it was the only thing that mattered. Her posts on social media, the photos of her new house, her champagne toasts, her perfectly manicured life, none of it included me. She had erased me, just as she had erased the woman who had sacrificed so much for her. The days blended together, but the weight of what was happening settled in my bones. The investigation was moving forward, and the lottery office had frozen the accounts. The money that she thought she had won so easily, that she had spent so recklessly, was no longer hers to enjoy. But that didn't stop her from acting like it was. She kept posting pictures, making grand gestures, celebrating her new life, while I waited quietly in the background. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The truth was doing the talking for me. And then the phone call came. The lottery commission called to tell me that everything had been processed. My claim was officially recognized. Her accounts were frozen, and the payout was on hold indefinitely. There was no turning back for her now. The house she had boasted about gone. The car she drove like a queen gone. The designer bags and the luxurious clothes, all of it was tied to stolen money, and now it was slipping away one piece at a time. I felt a strange calmness wash over me. This wasn't about revenge. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. It was something deeper than that, something like justice, but quieter. The feeling that comes when you finally realize that you don't have to scream to be heard. The truth doesn't need a megaphone. It only needs time. I didn't tell anyone about the frozen accounts, not even my neighbors. They had seen her transformation, how she went from the woman who needed help to the woman who threw everything away. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know the truth. I didn't need their validation. This wasn't about proving myself to anyone but me. As the days passed, I found a new rhythm to my life. I wasn't chasing her anymore. I wasn't searching for answers. I was living for myself. I was going through the motions, but with each passing day, I felt a little more like the woman I used to be, a woman who had the strength to stand on her own, no matter what life threw her way. And all the while, I waited. I waited for the moment when she would realize what had been taken from her, when the illusion of her perfect life would shatter and the truth would come crashing down around her. I didn't need to see it happen. I didn't need to be there to watch her fall, but I knew it was coming. There's a saying that when you build a house on sand, it will eventually collapse. She had built her empire on lies, and it wasn't going to stand. She didn't know it yet, but every post she made, every brag, every boast was just digging her hole deeper. I wasn't in a hurry. I had all the time in the world. It was only a matter of time before the truth caught up with her. I could feel it, lurking just beneath the surface of her perfect new world. While she posted photos of herself sipping cocktails at rooftop bars and basking in the spotlight of her newfound wealth, I stayed quiet, watching from the sidelines. She had no idea what was coming. The silence stretched on. I hadn't heard from her. Not a call, not a message. It was as if I had disappeared completely from her life, just like she had planned. But I knew. Better, her world was cracking piece by piece, and she didn't even realize it. She thought she was untouchable above it all. But life has a way of making sure the truth is revealed, and when it comes, it doesn't ask for permission. The first signs of her unraveling came when the social media posts slowed down. The photos that had once flooded her timeline now became few and far between. The luxury cars, the designer clothes, the trips, suddenly they weren't enough. I saw her shift. She started hiding behind her perfect images, the smiles in her photos less genuine, her captions more hollow. She was no longer the woman she had become, but the woman she had pretended to be. And then, one morning, it happened. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the news. Her accounts had been frozen. The house, the car, everything she had bought with stolen money, it was all in jeopardy. The State Lottery Commission had confirmed my claim. The money was mine, and her empire, built on lies and deceit, was crumbling. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt something else entirely. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long, the burden of holding everything in, lifted. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The truth had a way of doing that. It didn't just set things right, it set me free. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't have to. She would come to me eventually. The truth always does, but I wasn't going to chase it. I wasn't going to beg for an apology. She had stolen something from me, but I had taken it back. The money was just the surface. What she had taken from me went far deeper. It was my dignity, my love, my trust in her. She had traded it all for a fleeting illusion of power, and now that illusion was slipping away like sand through her fingers. The day she showed up at my door, I was ready. I had prepared myself for this moment. She knocked with urgency, her voice strained as she demanded to speak to me. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The woman who once needed me, who relied on me for everything, was now the one begging for my attention. When I opened the door, she stood there, her hair tangled, her clothes rumpled, no longer the polished version of herself she had flaunted online. She looked vulnerable, but it was too late. The door had already closed in my heart. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp and breathless. I didn't move. "There's nothing left to say," I replied, my words calm, steady. She frowned, her jaw tightening. "You can't do this to me," she snapped. "I didn't know it was your ticket." I let the silence hang between us, the air thick with her desperation. "You didn't check," I said softly, my gaze unwavering. "You didn't even care. You just took it and ran." Her mouth opened, but she couldn't find the words. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly trying to regain control of the situation, but she couldn't. I had already taken that from her. "I know you're angry," she said, her voice wavering. "But freezing my accounts, taking it all back, that's not justice, that's revenge." I shook my head. "You called me a witch, a leech. You posted my humiliation like it was a game, and now you want me to feel sorry for you." Her face paled, but she didn't apologize. She just looked at me with those eyes that had once held so much love for me. But now they were empty. They had nothing left to offer. "I need help," she whispered, her voice cracking. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't for her. It was for me. It was for the woman I had been, the woman who had always been there for her, even when she didn't deserve it. But that woman was gone, and I was done. "You've made your point," she said, her voice growing more desperate. "You've got your money, you've got your name on the check. Can we go back to normal now?" Normal, the word echoed in my mind. What did normal mean now? It meant me holding her up when she couldn't stand on her own. It meant cleaning up her messes, covering her bills, and sacrificing my own life for her. But no more. I looked her straight in the eye. "Goodbye." Her jaw dropped. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't repeat myself. I just started to close the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't shout. I simply closed it quietly. She shouted something about regret, but I didn't hear it. The door was already shut, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. I stood in front of the door for a moment, my hand resting on the cold wood. The house was quiet now, in a way it hadn't been in years. There were no more arguments, no more false promises, no more pretending. Everything felt different, like I had finally found the calm after the storm. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I might. There was no rush of victory, no swelling of pride. What I had just done was not about revenge. It wasn't about making her pay for her betrayal. It was about standing up for myself, for reclaiming my voice after years of silence. I hadn't just closed the door on her. I had closed it on the woman I had been, the woman who allowed herself to be used, to be invisible. And that was the victory. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Days passed, and the silence between us stretched longer than I had anticipated. I didn't hear from her, not a word, not a message. And honestly, I didn't expect to. She had never once come back to apologize, to acknowledge what she had done. But she wasn't the only one who had changed. I had changed too, and I was done being the one who carried the weight. Then, one evening, the call came. It wasn't a surprise, not really. I had known it was coming. She must have realized, finally, that there was no escaping what she had done. No more pretending she didn't know who had the winning ticket. No more playing the victim in her story. Her voice cracked through the line, desperate and frantic, the woman who once thought she could control everything now sounding small, fragile. "Mom," she began, her words stumbling over each other. "We need to talk. I need to fix this." Fix this. The words sounded hollow to me. How could she fix something that she had already broken beyond repair? She had made her choice. She had chosen money, chosen a life of lies, chosen everything over the very people who loved her unconditionally. I didn't rush to answer. I didn't give her the satisfaction of hearing me beg for the daughter I thought I had raised. No, I didn't need her to fix anything. The person who needed fixing was herself, and she had to come to that realization on her own. I waited. I let her voice crackle through the phone, her words dripping with desperation. I could hear the panic in her breath, the disbelief that someone, I, had taken the power back from her. "Please, Mom," she pleaded. "You don't understand. I didn't know. I didn't mean to hurt you. I got caught up. Please, I'm sorry." Sorry, the word seemed so foreign coming from her. It was a word she had never used before. Not when she left me to watch her kids while she partied. Not when she lied to me about her job interviews. Not when she borrowed money and never paid it back. She was never sorry until it affected her. I didn't ask for an apology. I said softly, "What you took from me, my trust, my love, none of that can be fixed with words." She was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind, trying to figure out what to say next. But I had already said everything there was to say. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she finally said, her voice quieter now. "I just need help. I'm losing everything. I don't know what to do." Losing everything. I had heard those words before, but they meant something entirely different coming from her now. She had used them for years, always playing the victim, always needing someone to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But now, the pieces were her own, and she had no one to blame but herself. I thought about it for a long time. It would have been so easy to give in, to let her back into my life, to pretend like nothing had happened. But I had already given enough. I had spent my life putting her needs before my own, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be the safety net that caught her every time she fell. "You made your choices," I said calmly, "and now you're facing the consequences." Her sobs filled the silence, raw and desperate, but I stood firm. This wasn't about me being right or her being wrong. This was about me taking back control of my life. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and this time I could hear the true regret in her voice, but it was too little, too late. "Goodbye," I said, my voice steady, my resolve firm. "I'm done." The line went quiet. I let it linger for a moment, just long enough for her to hear it, my final goodbye, and then I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't shout. I simply ended the call. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I didn't need to be a part of her life anymore. I didn't need to fix her. I needed to fix myself. And in that moment, I realized I had already done that. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that fills the room with the weight of what's been said and what hasn't. I found myself waking up in the mornings with a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. There were no more texts to read, no more calls to ignore. My life, once ruled by her demands and the messes she left behind, was finally my own again. The weight in my chest had lifted. I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under her expectations. It was strange, this newfound freedom. But it was also freeing in a way I hadn't anticipated. I could go through the day without wondering where she was, what she was doing, or whether I was still part of her story. I wasn't, and that was okay. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from her. It was from the lottery office. The moment I saw the return address, my stomach clenched. My first instinct was to ignore it, to keep walking. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The letter was short, but the words were final. The investigation had concluded, and the lottery office had confirmed that I was the rightful winner of the $10 million prize. All funds had been reissued to me, and her claim had been officially nullified. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, staring at the words. This wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the victory. It was about something deeper. It was about truth. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had lost along the way. The woman who had been used, discarded, and silenced. She was gone, and I was still standing. A week later, the press conference was scheduled. I knew it was coming, and part of me dreaded it. I didn't want to drag my family into this. I didn't want to be part of some public spectacle, but I also knew I had to do this. It wasn't just for me. It was for all the women who had been taken advantage of, for all the mothers who had silently given everything and asked for nothing in return, for every woman who had been erased and forgotten as if she didn't matter. I dressed carefully that morning. Not too fancy, not too plain, just a simple blouse, the one I used to wear when I was still someone's rock, when I still believed in the fairy tale. It wasn't a victory outfit. It wasn't a statement. It was just me, the woman I had become. When I walked into the small auditorium, the crowd was buzzing with anticipation. The local reporters were whispering to each other, ready to ask their questions. But I wasn't nervous. I was calm. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. When they called my name, I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and walked to the podium. I didn't need to say much. The truth had already spoken for me. The room fell silent as I looked at them, knowing that this moment was the one I had been waiting for. "My name is Evelyn Markham," I said, my voice steady. "I bought that ticket. I signed it, and I am the rightful winner." The room was silent for a long moment. The reporters glanced at each other, processing what I had just said. Then the questions came. They asked about the investigation, about the details of the case, about my relationship with my daughter. But I didn't answer the personal questions. This wasn't about her. This was about me, and for once, I wasn't going to let her be the center of the story. I stayed calm. I gave clear, concise answers, and then it was over, just like that. The truth was out in the open, and the world had seen it. There was no going back. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, the one she had once mocked for being old-fashioned and out of date. But now it felt like home. The kettle was on, the curtains still fraying, and the chipped paint by the sink, the same as it had always been. But it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace in my own home. Epilogue. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, new arrangements, and adjustments to my new reality. But amidst it all, there was a quiet certainty in me. I didn't need the mansion, the flashy car, or the designer bags she had once flaunted. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had everything I needed right here, my integrity, my dignity, and my peace. As for my daughter, the silence between us grew even more pronounced. I heard through the grapevine that her life was unraveling. The mansion she had bought with stolen money was under review. Her accounts had been frozen. And the people she had once called friends began to turn their backs. She had spent years chasing after the illusion of power, but when the illusion collapsed, she found herself standing alone. I didn't reach out. I didn't call. I didn't try to mend things. That chapter was over. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. But I knew one thing for sure: I would never let anyone steal my peace again. Final reflection. In the end, it wasn't the money that mattered. It wasn't the mansion or the designer clothes. It was the truth. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, finding my voice again, and choosing to walk away from a life that no longer served me. I had loved her with everything I had. But sometimes, loving someone means letting them go. And for the first time in my life, I was free.